When lightning strikes twice, the storm hit Seattle like a fist against glass. Dr. Vera Montgomery pressed her face to the break-room window of Harbor General Hospital, watching lightning fracture the sky over Elliott Bay. 3 double shifts. In 4 days had left her feeling hollow, but the weather matched her mood perfectly, violent and unpredictable. Her phone buzzed with another text from her sister Nina. "You missed dinner again. Mum's asking questions." Vera deleted it without responding. Some conversations required more energy than she had left to give. The automatic doors to the emergency department hissed behind her as she headed to the parking garage. Her shift had ended an hour ago, but paperwork had kept her chained to her desk. Now, as she walked through the dimly lit concrete structure, the only sounds were her footsteps echoing and rain hammering against the garage's upper levels. That's when she saw him. The man was slumped against the concrete pillar next to her. Honda, one hand pressed to his side, dark liquid seeping between his fingers. His expensive charcoal suit was torn and blood-stained, his face pale as winter sky. When he looked up at her approach, Vera saw eyes the color of deep forest, green, with flecks of gold that caught the fluorescent lights. "Don't," he said, his voice rough with pain. "Don't call anyone. Please." Vera's medical training kicked in before her common sense could interfere. She dropped her purse and knelt beside him, her hands already assessing the damage. The wound was high on his left side, below the ribcage. Fresh blood, but not arterial. "Lucky. I'm Dr. Montgomery," she said, applying pressure to the wound. "What's your name?" "Julian." He winced as she examined the injury. "Julian Cross." "Well, Julian Cross, you've been shot. This needs proper treatment, which means the emergency room. No hospitals." His grip on her wrist was surprisingly strong for someone losing blood. "Please, I can't explain why, but if you take me inside, people will die." Vera studied his face, looking for the telltale signs of drug use or psychological breakdown. Instead, she saw something she recognized from her own mirror. Desperation wrapped in forced calm. Whatever had happened to Julian Cross, he believed. Every word he was saying. "I have supplies in my car," she heard herself say. "Emergency kit. I can stabilize you, but you need real medical attention. Just stop the bleeding. That's all I ask." Against every protocol she'd ever learned, Vera found herself helping Julian into her back seat. She retrieved her emergency medical bag, a habit from her residency days when she'd worked in neighborhoods where ambulances were luxuries, and set to work under the garage's harsh lighting. The bullet had passed through cleanly, missing major organs. As she cleaned and sutured the wound, Julian remained conscious, watching her work with an intensity that made her nervous. "You're good at this," he said, as she applied the final bandage. "I should be. It's my job." Vera packed away her supplies. "What happened to you?" Julian was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. "I made someone very angry. Someone who solves problems by making them disappear permanently." "Are you a criminal?" "That depends on your definition." Julian struggled to sit up straighter. "Sometimes the people we need to stop hide behind badges and courtrooms. Sometimes justice requires methods that aren't strictly legal." Vera felt a chill that had nothing to do with the October wind whistling through the garage. "I should go." "You should." Julian pulled out his wallet, extracting a business card that looked expensive and official. "But if anything strange happens, in the next few weeks, if you feel like you're being watched, if people ask questions about tonight, call this number." The card read simply, "Julian Cross, private security consultant," with a phone number below. "What kind of strange things?" Vera asked, but Julian was already walking away, moving carefully but steadily toward the garage exit. "The kind that happen to people who save the wrong strangers," he called over his shoulder. Vera stood alone in the parking garage, holding the card in her trembling hands. Lightning illuminated the concrete structure in stark black and white, and for a moment she felt like she was standing at the edge of something vast and dangerous. She had no idea that Julian Cross was a federal agent who'd spent 2 years infiltrating Vincent Morrison's criminal empire. She didn't know that Morrison controlled half the illegal activity on the West Coast, or that Julian had just barely escaped an assassination attempt after being discovered. Most importantly, she didn't know that every second of her encounter with Julian had been captured by the garage's security cameras that Morrison's people monitored as part of their network of eyes throughout the city. As Vera drove home through the storm, she couldn't shake the feeling that her carefully ordered life had just taken a turn into unknown territory. The business card seemed to burn in her jacket pocket, and she found herself checking her rearview mirror more often than usual. Behind her, 3 cars back, a black sedan followed her route home. Shadows in the daylight, Detective Rosa Valdez stood in the abandoned warehouse where 3 bodies had been found at dawn. The crime scene photographer's flash illuminated blood spatters across concrete walls, each burst of light revealing new details of violence. 2 of Morrison's men lay dead, but the 3rd body was what interested her, a federal informant who'd been feeding information about Morrison's trafficking operations. Execution style, her partner Detective Williams observed, pointing to the precise bullet wounds. Professional work. Rosa nodded, but her attention was caught by something else. Drops of blood leading away from the scene, too fresh to belong. To the corpses, someone had been wounded and escaped. Across town, Vincent Morrison sat in his penthouse office overlooking Puget Sound. His fingers steepled as he watched security footage on multiple monitors. The man known as the Architect had built his empire on information, and every camera, every informant, every corrupt official fed into his network of control. There, his Lieutenant Felix Crane pointed to one screen showing the hospital parking garage. That's our missing agent. Morrison leaned forward, studying Julian Cross as he stumbled toward a woman in scrubs. Dr. Vera Montgomery, he read from the file Felix placed before him. Trauma surgeon, Harbor General, lives alone, sister works at a law firm downtown. Should we move on her? Not yet. Morrison's voice was calm, calculated. Dr. Montgomery doesn't know what she's stumbled into. Let's see how useful she might be. Meanwhile, in a secure federal facility across the city, Agent Director Catherine Hayes reviewed the disaster that was Operation Heartbreak. 2 years of undercover work compromised in a single night. She looked up as Marcus Stone entered her office, his weathered face grim. How bad is it? Hayes asked. Cross is blown. Morrison knows we had someone inside. Marcus dropped into a chair, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. But that's not the worst part. Hayes raised an eyebrow. There's a civilian involved, a doctor who treated Cross after the shooting. Morrison's people have already identified her. Recommendations? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. We pull Cross out, put the doctor in protective custody, and start over with a new operation in 6 months. And the 30 children Morrison's holding in his trafficking network? The silence stretched between them. Both agents knew the mathematics of their work. Sometimes immediate lives had to be weighed against future ones. Sometimes individuals became acceptable losses for the greater good. There might be another way, Marcus finally said. If Morrison wants Cross dead badly enough, he might be willing to trade information for the opportunity. Hayes' expression hardened. You're suggesting we use an innocent civilian as bait. I'm suggesting we give Morrison what he thinks he wants while getting what we need. The doctor becomes leverage. Morrison gets his revenge. We get the location of his holding facilities. And Dr. Montgomery? Marcus met her gaze steadily. Acceptable loss. Back at Harbor General, Vera completed her rounds, trying to focus on her patients while fighting the nagging feeling that something was wrong. Twice she'd caught glimpses of men in dark suits near the hospital cafeteria. Once she'd noticed the same black sedan she'd seen the night before, parked across from the staff entrance. During her lunch break, she pulled out Julian's business card and dialed the number. "Cross?" His voice answered immediately. "It's Dr. Montgomery." "Something's happening." A pause. "What kind of something?" "Men watching the hospital. Cars following me. Just like you said." Vera's voice dropped to a whisper. "Who are you, really?" "Someone who's about to make the biggest mistake of his life," Julian said quietly. "Stay where you are. Don't leave the hospital alone. I'm coming to get you." As Vera hung up, she didn't notice Felix Crane sitting 3 tables away, listening to every word through a directional microphone. He smiled and sent a text message. The good doctor just made contact. Ready to proceed. The trap was being set, and Dr. Vera Montgomery was about to learn that some acts of kindness carry prices that can destroy everything you thought you knew about right and wrong. Part 3. The hunter becomes the hunted. Vera's apartment. Building seemed different when she returned that evening, too quiet, with shadows that felt too deep. She'd left the hospital with Julian, who'd insisted on walking her home despite her protests about involving him further. Now, standing in her living room, she wished she'd listened to her instincts and stayed at the hospital. "Pack light," Julian said, checking the locks on her windows. "Essential documents, medications, clothes for 3 days. I'm not going anywhere until you tell me what's really happening." Vera crossed her arms, studying his face in the lamplight. The professional mask he'd worn was cracking, revealing something desperate underneath. Julian turned from the window. "My name is Julian Cross, and I'm a federal agent. For 2 years, I've been undercover in Vincent Morrison's organization, gathering evidence of his human trafficking network." The words hit Vera like cold water. Human trafficking. Children mostly. Runaways, immigrants, anyone society won't miss. Morrison moves them through a network that spans from Vancouver to Los Angeles. Julian's voice was steady, but his hands shook as he spoke. 3 nights ago, my cover was blown. Someone leaked my identity." Vera sank onto her couch. "And I helped. You escape. You saved my life, but Morrison has eyes everywhere. Cameras, informants, corrupt officials. By now, he knows exactly who you are and where you live." A sound from the hallway made them both freeze. Footsteps, too heavy and deliberate to belong to her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Chen. Julian pulled out a pistol, motioning for Vera to stay quiet. The front door exploded inward. Felix Crane entered first, flanked by 2 men in tactical gear. His expensive suit was immaculate, his silver hair perfectly styled, making him look more like a banker than a killer. "Dr. Montgomery," he said politely, "Mr. Morrison would like a word." Julian stepped between them, his weapon trained on Felix. "Not happening," Felix smiled. "Agent Cross, you've caused my employer considerable inconvenience." He gestured, and his men raised their weapons. "Dr. Montgomery, you have a choice. Come with us willingly, and your sister Nina remains safe. Resist, and we visit her law office tomorrow." Vera's blood turned to ice. "Leave my sister out of this." "That's entirely up to you." Felix checked his watch. "Mr. Morrison is waiting at Pier 47. We can do this easy, or we can make it complicated. Your choice." Julian's grip tightened on his. "Gun. Vera, get behind me." "No." Vera stood up, her decision made. "I'll go." "Vera, my sister doesn't deserve to die because I helped a stranger." She looked at Julian, memorizing his face. "Some choices are simple." Felix nodded approvingly. "Very wise, Doctor." As they reached the door, Julian called out, "Felix!" The lieutenant turned back. "Tell Morrison he can have me instead, even trade, my life for hers." Felix's smile never wavered. "Mr. Morrison isn't interested in trades, Agent Cross. He's interested in sending messages. The doctor comes with us." Well, you're welcome to try and stop us. The tactical team filed out with Vera between them. As the door closed, Julian heard her voice in the hallway. Call Director Hayes. Tell her about the children. Julian stood alone in the destroyed apartment, understanding that everything had changed. This wasn't about justice anymore, or duty, or the greater good. This was about a woman who'd shown kindness to a stranger and was about to pay for it with her life. He pulled out his encrypted phone and dialed Marcus Stone. It's Cross. They have her. Julian, you need to extract immediately. The operation is compromised, not without Vera. Agent Cross, that's an order. Julian looked around the apartment. Medical journals stacked neatly on shelves, photos of Vera with her sister, a life built on helping others. Some orders aren't worth following. He hung up and began planning an assault on one of the most dangerous criminals on the West Coast. Outside, storm clouds were gathering again, and Julian Cross was about to discover exactly how far he'd go to save someone who'd saved him first. No saints in Hell Director Catherine Hayes stood before a wall of monitors in the Federal Task Force Command Center, watching red dots move across a digital map of Seattle. Each dot represented an asset in play: agents, informants, surveillance, teams, all converging on the waterfront where Vincent Morrison had taken Dr. Vera Montgomery. We have thermal imaging on the warehouse, Agent Torres reported. 12 heat signatures inside, including the target. Hayes nodded grimly. After Marcus Stone's call about Julian going rogue, she'd mobilized every available resource. But politics and procedure meant her hands were tied until Morrison made an overt move. Ma'am, Torres continued, we're also tracking Agent Cross. He's moving toward the pier alone. Damn fool, Marcus muttered from his position at the communications station. He's going to get them both killed. Hayes understood Julian's motivation. She'd felt the same desperate rage when civilians became casualties in operations she'd commanded. But understanding didn't change the mathematics of the situation. Director. The secure line buzzed with a familiar voice. Morrison himself. Mr. Morrison. Hayes answered calmly. I believe we have a mutual problem. Your agent has something that belongs to me. 2 years of intelligence about my business operations. I have something that belongs to you, a federal agent's conscience in the form of Dr. Montgomery. Hayes closed her eyes. What are you proposing? A trade. The doctor's life for the location of my primary holding facility. 30 children for 1 woman. Simple arithmetic. The command center fell silent. Every agent knew what Morrison was offering. The breakthrough they'd been chasing for years, the chance to rescue dozens of trafficking victims. All it would cost was 1 innocent civilian who'd made the mistake of helping a bleeding stranger. You have 1 hour, Morrison continued. Pier 47, Warehouse 3, come alone, or Dr. Montgomery dies slowly. The line went dead. Marcus broke the silence. Catherine, we have to consider. I know what we have to consider. Hayes stared at the tactical display, watching Julian's dot move steadily toward the waterfront. Get me a direct line to Agent Cross. Meanwhile, at the pier, Vera sat tied to a chair in the center of the warehouse, watching Vincent Morrison pace before her. He was younger than she'd expected. Maybe 50, with silver-streaked hair and the kind of calm that came from absolute power. Dr. Montgomery, Morrison said conversationally, do you know the difference between a criminal and a businessman? Vera didn't respond. A businessman understands that everything has a price. Your life, Agent Cross's conscience, those 30 children in my facilities, all commodities to be traded for the right value. You're insane. Morrison smiled. I'm practical. Your friend Julian cost me 2 years of careful planning and millions in lost revenue. The federal government wants those children rescued. Everyone gets what they want, except me. You get the satisfaction of saving 30 innocent lives. Some might call that a bargain. Vera heard footsteps outside and felt her heart race as Julian appeared in the warehouse doorway, his hands raised but his eyes scanning for threats. "Julian, no!" she called out. "It's a trap!" "I know," he said quietly, never taking his eyes off Morrison. "Sometimes you walk into traps anyway." Morrison gestured and his men surrounded Julian. Agent Cross, punctual as always. "Let her go, Morrison. This is between us." "Nothing is between just two people, Agent. Every action creates ripples." Morrison checked his watch. "Director Hayes has 30 minutes to decide whether Dr. Montgomery's life is worth 30 children's freedom." Julian's face went white. "You contacted Hayes?" "The federal government will trade one civilian for 30 trafficking victims. It's mathematics, Julian, cold, simple mathematics." As if summoned by Morrison's words, Hayes' voice crackled through Julian's earpiece. "Agent Cross, you are ordered to extract immediately. We're moving forward with Morrison's deal." Julian reached up and crushed the earpiece under his heel. "No," Vera whispered, understanding flooding her face. "They're going to trade me." Julian looked at her across the warehouse, and she saw something break in his expression. "Not if I have anything to say about it," Morrison laughed. "What exactly do you think you can do against 12 armed men?" Julian smiled grimly. "Something Director Hayes taught me a long time ago. Sometimes the best way to win an impossible game is to change the rules entirely." Part 5. What we save, saves us. The explosion came from the warehouse's east wall at exactly 11:47 p.m., 13 minutes before Morrison's deadline. Julian had spent his years undercover learning every detail of Morrison's operations, including the architectural weak points of his waterfront properties. As smoke and debris filled the air, Julian dove toward Vera's chair while Morrison's men scrambled for cover. But the explosion was only the beginning of his plan. "Federal agents, building is surrounded," the voice came from Director Hayes through a bullhorn outside. But Hayes wasn't supposed to arrive for another 10 minutes. Julian had counted on Morrison's arrogance making him ignore the early timeline. What Morrison didn't know was that Julian had never disconnected from federal surveillance. Every word spoken in the warehouse had been transmitted to Hayes' command center, including Morrison's confession about the 30 children and the locations of his holding facilities. "You clever bastard," Morrison snarled, drawing his pistol. As Julian cut Vera's bonds. "You think this changes anything?" Julian positioned himself between Morrison and Vera. "It changes everything. Your confession just gave the FBI everything they need for raids on all your facilities. Those children are already being rescued." Morrison's eyes widened as he understood the scope of Julian's gambit. "You sacrificed your cover just to get me talking. Some things are worth sacrificing for." The warehouse doors burst open as Hayes led a tactical team inside. Morrison's men, realizing they were outnumbered and surrounded, began dropping their weapons. But Morrison himself wasn't finished. "If I'm going down," he said, leveling his pistol at Vera, "she comes with me." Julian moved without thinking, placing himself directly in Morrison's line of fire. The shot rang out across the warehouse, echoing off concrete walls like thunder, but the bullet never found its mark. Detective Rosa Valdez, who'd been tracking the blood trail from the warehouse crime scene for 3 days, had positioned herself in the building's upper level. Her sniper rifle spoke once, and Vincent Morrison crumpled to the floor. "Civilians secure," Hayes called over her radio. "Primary target down. Beginning facility raids now." As paramedics treated Julian's minor wounds from the explosion, Vera sat on a crate nearby, trying to process everything that had happened. In 3 days, her quiet life as a surgeon had been shattered and rebuilt around impossible choices and moral arithmetic she'd never imagined. "The children?" she asked Hayes. "All 30 accounted for. Safe." Hayes studied Vera's face. "Your involvement in this operation led directly to their rescue, Dr. Montgomery. Sometimes civilian actions have consequences we never intended." Julian approached them. his arm in a sling but otherwise unharmed. "How are you holding up?" "I keep thinking about something Morrison said, about everything having a price." Vera looked out at the harbour, where dawn was beginning to break over the water. "What's the price of saving 30 children? Sometimes it's 2 years of undercover work," Julian answered. "Sometimes it's risking your career to go rogue. Sometimes it's just being willing to help a bleeding stranger in a parking garage." Vera smiled for the first time in days. "And sometimes the stranger saves you back." 6 months later, Dr. Vera Montgomery opened the doors to the Harbour Free Clinic, funded by federal compensation for her role in Morrison's downfall. Julian Cross, reassigned to the Seattle field office, was her first volunteer. They'd learned that salvation rarely comes free, and that the strangers we save often return the favor in ways we never expected. In a world where everything seemed to have a price, they discovered that some things, kindness, courage, love, were worth any cost. The storm that had brought them together had passed, but the changes it wrought would last a lifetime. Sometimes, Vera reflected as she treated her first patient, the most dangerous thing you can do is exactly the right thing, and sometimes that's the only choice worth making.